Suzanne, welcome. I am
Hello.
so excited to have you here.
I'm
Uh,
excited to be a part of this.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's been a long time since we've chatted, so this is really extra special.
Yes, indeed it is.
And I'm really honored to present Suzanne. She walks the path of a gentle, sensitive soul with gifts, abilities, and dreams of being of service in an impactful and positive way. She owns and operates Time for You, a healing art studio in Phoenix, Arizona, offering soul mentoring, deep presence bodywork, hypnotherapy, sacred oil anointings, which it's like, okay, how do I get down to Phoenix to have one of these? Shamanic soul care and dream work exploration. She shares elements of her personal journey through her Souls Aloft blog and is the host of Souls Aloft Radio, a monthly program on Blog Talk where she pairs wonderful guests with soulful topics for discussion, not because she has the answers, but because she values meaningful conversation around the question. And I have to say I've been very honored by you, Suzanne, to have been a guest to do the inaugural of this Fireside Chats with Crone. So thank you. And having listened, I think I have actually listened to every single one of them,
Wow.
including live, which is just like, wow. But I think it's because of the time zone and it's lunch hour,
Yeah.
so I can hit them.
Yeah.
So it's been really, really wonderful. Suzanne spent some time in the paralegal world, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then she made the conscious decision to follow her heart and her soul. And with that, I'm just going to, as always, I will put a little blurb for everyone to know how to get in touch with you. But I'd like to start there, if we could,
Sure.
with moving from the paralegal to follow your soul's desire
Mm-hmm.
and how that led you to where you are here.
Well, that's a great question. And I would love to just say that I woke up and realized that I needed to take over my life and follow my soul's path. And so I took my life in my own hands and struck out in a new way. But really, what that looked like was I was sick all the time. I was miserable all the time. I worked in the corporate world and as a paralegal for about 15 years.
Wow.
And it was a really well-paying, high-stress job. And I actually worked for there's all those bad lawyer jokes out there, right? But I worked for amazing attorneys, actually, my entire career. People that really supported me and uplifted me and wanted me to do well in that career. And so would have taken me as far up that corporate ladder as I was willing and able to go. And every step of the way, I just became more soul sick. And that soul sickness turned into physical illness.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I wasn't at work, I was horizontal on my couch.
Wow.
And that is nights, weekends, holidays, vacations, and then several weeks a year sick, unable to go to work. And this
Wow.
was my life. So it's a pretty thing to say that I struck out to follow my soul's path. But at the time, it was really out of desperation and just this internal dissolving of my life. Like I didn't know how much longer I was even going to be able to maintain that corporate job and that life.
Mm-hmm.
So it really came out of desperation and physical unrest that sort of spurred me towards finding a different way. And it was one step at a time from there. One magical encounter, right, after another. Looking back, I can see it all laid out so perfectly, all the stepping stones. And then this person entered my life, and then this thing happened. But it was really the first step saying, I can't do this anymore. I have to find another way, and moving, and then making some choices and moving away from what was I mean, maybe it might sound a little dramatic, but what felt like was killing me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then everything kind of happened from there. And so it's easy to look back and see that I was definitely, I really fell into my soul's path, but that wasn't like one day I was here, the next day everything's perfect,
Right.
So in hindsight, I can definitely see that I found my soul's path and my soul's work, and I enjoy so much more wellness now than I ever did before. But it was a slow evolution.
Right. And, many times when people are, first discovering this for themselves and they look at others, they think it does. I think they get overwhelmed with thinking that it does happen overnight. How am I going to get all this accomplished?
Sure.
When it doesn't happen overnight. Mm-hmm. There are some changes that happen overnight. Sure. In how you might perceive something, but the actual transition from point A to point B is not an overnight sensation.
Well, and I got to tell you, Terry, it's really interesting because this very tidbit of a conversation has come up about 3 times in the last week, and that is that you don't have to know exactly where you're going or how you're going to get there. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have the whole picture figured out. It's just about the one little step at a time. And so often when we're making those little steps, mm-hmm. we feel like, well, how could that possibly turn, how could this possibly be turning into anything amazing? And so we kind of poo-poo all the little things, the little shifts that we can make, but it's those little pieces that build that foundation, and then more blossoms from there. So it's these small incremental steps that lead into, right? You're going to be somewhere in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So, why not be somewhere amazing in 2 years?
Right, exactly.
Even though you have no idea how you would get from where you want to be to, from where you are to where you want to be in 2 years, you never know what can step up to meet and support you and get you where you want to be.
Exactly. It's just having that concept of a dream. What is it that you want to be when you grow up?
Good luck figuring that out.
Oh, I'm still doing it.
When you grow up, when does that happen?
When you look at it, it's like, and it's funny because when you reach a certain age, because we're talking about Crohn's, you reach that certain age, and you're supposed to have all of this deeper, have it all. You're supposed to have it all by then. The kids are raised, you have the grandbabies, you've got your top dollar salary coming in, or whatever it is that your dream was, whether it's, being in the workplace or even having followed your soul path and having this amazing spa and resort or this healing center or something. It doesn't always happen by the time you hit what is perceived as the coming of age for a woman, which is the Crohn years. Mm-hmm. You're still laying down the foundation.
Sure. Yeah, the journey doesn't stop there. And that's what's wrong with our culture right now, is we tend to look at that getting to that certain age. Oh, you're a woman of a certain age now. And then I hope you accomplished everything that you set out to do. Well, why? I've got all of this. I have the magic and the majesty of my Crohn years now to create something else altogether if I choose to. Exactly. And that's the piece I think that we're missing overall, that we've lost.
Yes, I think so too. And it's interesting that, and if you have some examples of this, because I think it's interesting that I find that there are some women who are older than I am that are looking at me for the inspiration in the sense of they can change their life.
Sure. I totally see that. I understand that. I'd love to jump in and talk about that if I could.
Okay, go for it. Yes, please.
Because I was thinking about this today, and I think, so I'm going to back up in the conversation just a minute and come back around to that, to say that we once had a society where all stages of a woman's life were treated and met with respect and reverence, and so moving from that mother role into the Crohn years, mm-hmm. there was ritual and tradition and customs and all of that, so that there was a passing of the torch, right? And all along you've been sort of primed for that role, and then there is the passing of the torch, and then you do wear that mantle, if you will. And for a long time we have been in a more patriarchal society, very kind of masculine centric, and for many families you're looking at women that have a lineage now of disempowered women, right? Going back, right? A lineage for quite a while of disempowered women. And now we're wanting for those disempowered women to somehow pass the torch and to empower the next people coming up. And it's broken, clearly, but it's not really going to just fix itself, right? So that all of a sudden the crones of our current time are going to just wake up one morning and just feel empowered and enlivened and ready to take on that role. Right. So I think what has to happen is those people that are on the threshold and getting ready to enter that stage, and the people that are already there, we have to mentor ourselves and each other. We have to be able to mentor each other, because there isn't this passing of the torch. Now, for most people, we don't have that. Right. So it's about mentoring ourselves, holding each other, mentoring each other, and if we don't have a good, strong role model for what we're looking to do in our family or our immediate community, to look outside of that and try to find an external source of inspiration and guidance and wisdom, so that we can reset and empower a whole generation of women, so that then we can pass a torch. But right now we're asking the disempowered to somehow lift up the next generation. Well, how does that work?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So having said that, it makes perfect sense to me that you are finding women that are older than you that are looking to you to assist with that, because I think that's the peer mentoring I'm talking about. Yeah. That's how we're going to help lift each other up.
Right. I agree with you. I truly agree with you. And the interesting thing is that they themselves, the ones who are older than I am, have had the desire to have a mentor or someone there. And they have done what they could with what was available, but they too have been missing and feeling that link broken.
Right.
And no engagement. And, it's not that we didn't love the women in our lives. It's because the lineage, it's been broken for quite a while.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, and then someone takes it. I mean, I think we can all think of women who have been in the news as we were growing up, and they were singular. It wasn't like there was 50 of them.
Right.
Now when you're out there and you're on television or you're going through the internet and reading the news, there's a good handful of women that the younger generations can actually look towards. For that. But when you're looking at us moving into it, in it, or way into it, it's that mentoring between each, because even the women who are older than I am have a lot to mentor that offer me in mentoring.
Sure. They may not recognize it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I think we all hold a piece for each other right now. And I think that we can all help each other. This brings up another point, I think, about like the present time eldering woman, right? There is this real world situation where out in the world, I hear it all the time, middle-aged women and older feel ignored. They feel not right. They're invisible. They're not part of the mainstream. They don't matter. And that is so disheartening. And I know it's heavy and it's real. I'm not saying it isn't real. Right. However, I was thinking about this, and if you'll indulge me, another kind of sidetrack story.
No, go for it. I love it.
This is going to sound like, how are these two things going to come together? But first I'll say, I think that we as women, right, have to carry our truth, and that we are vital, vibrant, viable, important people in society. We have to walk that. We have to carry that, no matter how the world is stepping to meet us. Mm-hmm. And I have this really weird example. There was this girl in middle school, and I was in a couple middle schools, so I can't. It wasn't like I had been with her all the way through elementary school, and I can't remember her name, but she was taller and more developed than a lot of the girls were, and it was the middle school years before the boys had like sprouted up yet, so she kind of towered over everybody. And she was a bit awkward, right? And she was teased a lot. Of course, this is the early 80s, so this was before schools were looking out for bullying, and there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So she was teased a lot and made fun of a lot. And this girl held herself head held high, spine straight, carried herself as if she was royalty. And it was so confusing to me at the time because I did not come from a place of high self-esteem as a kid. Mm-hmm. So I just couldn't figure her out. And there were times when she'd get the teasing, mostly from the boys, and they, she would say, well, that's not true. I don't remember the exact term, conversations, but that's not true. I am smart. I am beautiful. I am special. And they would, of course, that would freak them out. Like, who are you to claim that? What makes you think that? Yeah. And I remember her saying something about, well, my father tells me this, or she had this beautiful, amazing family support that was telling her this. Well, of course, that just made the ribbing even greater. Well, they have to tell you that. They're your family. But it didn't matter. She still carried herself, head held high, right?
Yeah.
Spine straight, like that was her truth. So that confused me at the time. Like I said, I just didn't understand how could this be a real thing. And then later in my developing years, I remember looking back on it and thinking, wow, that was probably a lot of false bravado, and she was probably really, really wounded and hurt by that. And I think there might be some truth there too. But what I'm coming to realize today was, like, when you're a kid, your world is school. That is your external world for the most part. Okay, so she had this internal truth, right? Her family that's telling her, you're beautiful, you're special, you're important. Mm-hmm. But she went outside and met her world every day that did not match that truth. Yeah. Did not match that truth or mirror that truth to her, and she still carried herself in that truth, right?
Right.
That's what I'm talking about today with... Yes, it's a truth that the external world, you are getting treated a little bit, right? Like, This is awful to say, but like Junior behind the butcher counter at the grocery store is not necessarily, we can't expect him to just wake up one day and all of a sudden treat us with the respect that we expect and deserve. But we can step up to that counter and carry ourselves as if we do deserve that respect and the space that we're taking up in the world, that we are important and vibrant. So I think that's where the shift has to come. And I know it's hard, and I know it's a real thing. I know people are feeling disempowered and ignored, but I think we have to change the way we take up space in the world, like we should.
Right. Right, exactly. We should matter. It's so very true. And it's finding that right phrase to say to a fellow woman who is feeling that way and going through that way. We all know the proverbial story. The woman who was married for 30 or 40 years, husband comes home, has a younger girlfriend and wants a divorce. And helping that woman to understand that his decisions are not about her.
Right.
Which is
easier said, right? I mean,
said.
Because that is a truth. That's a hard truth to maybe really be able to hear in that moment. But again, that's where we can help lift each other up.
Exactly. Knowing those stories, knowing those times. And we all have those stories. I mean, I have stories of being laid off, and knowing each time I'm getting laid off, the last time I knew it was going to take a lot longer time to find a job because I was now in the quote unquote protective age group.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only protective so that there's a blatant lawsuit standing out there. But most companies are much wiser than that.
Right.
But not going in to that space of I won't find employment because I'm a woman of a certain age allows me to come, as you spoke so eloquently about, she stood to her inner truth. Even when it didn't match the outside world.
Well, and let's be real here. So, a woman in her crone years, right? That's staying inside culture, right? You're in our society, right? Like wisdom and her experience and her cultivated bullshit detector, let's just say, from in life, is really going to look at our current societal model of go, 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 acquire, faster, and see the ludicrousness of that, right. And not really just blatantly agree, very non-conforming, right? Right. And that doesn't necessarily fit in nice and easily with the corporate way of doing things, the corporate model.
It doesn't.
So
and you still have, and it's again coming back to what you said, standing tall to your inner truth. I remember so many times wondering why a friend of mine was always so slow walking through the hallways or getting things done, and I'm already 3 blocks down the road. And now, knowing that she was standing true to her inner truth, which was, I'm going to be slow because this is how I move. And I don't care how many times you drag me, Terry, I'm not going to go any faster.
Right? That was her pace and her flow. And I think the other thing we can do better, we can, of course, as I said, help to hold each other up and, right?
Yeah.
And mentor and just be there for each other. And also maybe do a better job of not looking around going, well, why are they doing it that way? Or they really should be doing it this way. Or this is the right, act your age. She should be, we do it to each other. It's so ingrained in us. And to recognize that at any stage of life, that everybody might be doing things differently. And if we want to sit and poke and make fun of the mainstream society, we have to be willing to allow people to exist and do things outside of that without getting our weird looks and our strange judgments. And so I think we could, really do a better job of lifting people up, even when we don't necessarily understand what it is they're doing or why.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Or why are they doing it this way? If they just asked me, I could tell them how to do it. Fortunately, I had intervention in my life that came that way. So there's this little voice inside my head that says, don't tell them how to do it. Because it's like, no, remember when you hated it? At the same time, when you move into the crone, there is this natural slowing down anyway. And when you're someone who goes fast, it can create a discord.
Sure.
And an uncomfortableness about, and almost a dislike of what you're going into.
Right.
And figuring out how to allow all of that to really come full circle within you.
Well, you say full circle, and I love that because I think of it like it's almost like when you're fully ensconced in that crone archetype. It's almost like you've come full circle, and you're back like in the energy of the divine child who before society has really gotten their hooks in them, and they know the magic of the world to just be in it. right? To just be. And so it's almost like you come full circle, and when you're fully ensconced in that crone phase, you see the truth of that again.
Yes.
But I think this discord that you're talking about makes perfect sense when you've got one foot in both places.
Yeah.
And you're in the transition piece, and I'm sure that's, really confusing. I'm just getting to the point where I'm at some transition places that are equal parts annoying and frustrating and make me laugh at myself, and some I don't so much care about, but it's a trip.
It is. It truly is a trip. It is. It's like, yeah, it is a trip. It's like, and there are moments when you do feel like you're going insane. I mean, you've got this body doing something. You've got your emotions doing something. And you've got a sense, in many ways, that the world's starting to pass you by because you're in such a void with no mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
There's even the goddesses, which Jen and I spoke about last month, which was wonderful. They talk about it, but there's no further discussion. Those types of mentorship are missing. They're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Those stories that went even deeper into those goddesses, they're gone. So you have someone, an archetype to look towards, but you don't have the fine detail to help you to decipher the insanity.
Well, and I think that's where we have to be walking it and embodying these archetypes ourselves so that we are creating the new stories.
Yes, absolutely.
I think to bring it all back together, I think that's what has to happen.
Yeah.
Which puts a lot of, that kind of puts a lot of weight and pressure, right, on your generation. Like what we're talking about,
Yeah, we're all ready for it.
We're really, that's a big chunk of doing things a new way and figuring it out and recreate it and reclaiming, right, the magic of the crone years and reestablishing these support systems and these empowering stories that are really about mentoring and training and providing assistance along the way.
Yes.
And you kind of are having to figure it out as you go. But I like that the conversation is happening because what I feel like is going to be different, it's almost like, the medical school model where like the poor doctors that are in training go through this like crazy, ridiculous, and I think they're changing it now, but in the past where they didn't sleep for 3 days and, crazy time. And then like the next set come through and it's like, well, I had to do it, you have to do it, right? And then the next set comes through, I had to do it, you have to do it. There's that sense of, this was really, really hard for me, it needs to be really, really hard for you. It's just the way of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like because we're having these kind of conversations, that maybe there are some people that are ready to step up and say, okay, well, how can I walk this differently so I change the story for the people that come up next? Instead of, I had to go through it in the dark, you have to go through it in the dark. Right? Which is a little bit kind of how it's been for a while.
Right. And it's very true. I mean, it to me, as you talked about that, it's very similar to when they talk about, if there's alcoholism or child abuse or divorce constantly through generation after generation. And though, I've heard it told that souls will come in and say, I signed up, I'm going to stop this. And there are actually people who say, from this day forward, it stops with me, and they will not participate in it. Mm-hmm. And it actually shifts the lineage and shifts the paradigm and shifts the story. So like you are saying with this, those of us who are new, my age, my generation, how are we going to create the mentoring that can be added upon so that there's not the void anymore?
Yeah. Thinking about this today, I thought about another interesting aspect that's going to be probably coming in the decades to come. And it's like we've reached a pivot point, almost a return to the multi-generational household.
Yeah.
Not because we've decided that's the best way to do it, but because of the economy. You've got the kids that aren't moving out of the parents, right? They come to their adult lives. They've gone through school, they're in their careers, but they're still living in their parents' homes for economic reasons, right? Well, if you fast forward to that a couple decades, then you're back to having the kids, the parents, the grandparents, and maybe some extended family, right? In the same household. So that's really a reversion to, the way things were some time ago. And I wonder if that isn't also going to help the process of reaching back to help, to lend a helping hand to the person that's right behind you on the path. And for the beautiful elder family member to be promoting and helping blossom the magic in the children, right? That the parents just don't really have the time for anymore. No. So, I think there's possibly some really interesting things shifting in our societal structure over that. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But now is the good time for the crones coming into that part of their life stage to get empowered. Right? So that those changes can really start happening.
That, it started with women going to work and having careers. Then it was legislation that allowed a working woman to have a much longer maternity leave, the family and FMLA. And then that generation that said, I'm going to stay at home and we're going to do with one income.
Yeah.
And I'll return when I want to return.
Right.
But still I'm getting my education. So as you said with the generation and now they're staying at home, you can see that we have made progress, but now we've got to step into honoring and embracing what it's like to be a crone. There's a magical amount of freedom in there. And I loved how you talked about you come back to the divine child. Because you begin to feel those expressions that you had to give up once you started school and you were at the age of reason.
Right.
And as a crone, when you start to move in there, you start to give yourself permission to.
Yeah. And because we are, when you're...
That, it started with women going to work and having careers. Then it was legislation that allowed a working woman to have a much longer maternity leave, the family and FMLA. And then that generation that said, I'm going to stay at home and we're going to do with one income.
Yeah.
And I'll return when I want to return.
Right.
But still I'm getting my education. So as you said with the generation and now they're staying at home, you can see that we have made progress, but now we've got to step into honoring and embracing what it's like to be a crone. There's a magical amount of freedom in there. And I loved how you talked about you come back to the divine child. Because you begin to feel those expressions that you had to give up once you started school and you were at the age of reason.
Right.
And as a crone, when you start to move in there, you start to give yourself permission to.
Yeah. And because we are, when you're entering into your crone years, you still have a big chunk. Most of us have a big chunk of time left in our lives, hopefully, right? Yeah. Barring any strange disasters. And there's a lot that you can do in that time. And I think we've gotten to this place where it's like we retire and then we just kind of go, hang out somewhere and do frivolous things to pass the time. Not everybody, but there's that big,
There is that big intention.
Yeah, and I think that I think a lot of people now are getting itchy about that and going, yeah, I need to find something that, I didn't work hard as long as I worked or work hard raising my family so that I could get to this point and twiddle my thumbs or do what somebody expects me to do. I like to think of the empowered crones sort of living outside of our cultural constructs, and like we said when I had you on my show, this sort of the mischievousness that's going on, and collaborations and coming together and bonding and creating amazing things in the world, because that's what's available.
Yes. Having fun.
Yes.
What a novel idea. Let's just go have fun.
Yeah.
I love that movie, The Traveling Pants of Sisterhood, or whatever it was.
Yeah. Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
Thank you. What I imagined when I saw it, because I certainly was not in my 20s when it came out, I have dreams of gathering a bunch of women my age and just traveling and having a hoot, running around and laughing and jumping off cliffs and all of those types of things. It's those things that you don't stop that just because your children are raised and everything else.
Well, you already are doing that. I have to tell you, I've traveled with you in Ireland, and one of the greatest things for me was hanging out with this group of women that included older women in my life, like you and Wendy and Donna, that were just as silly, if not sillier, than the youngest in the group, having a great time, not worrying about how you're perceived or what you're looking like or being foolish, or just really being in the moment. And that was very inspiring. I love that.
Thank you. I had a great time. Now talk to me. You went to spend time with the 13 Indigenous grandmothers.
Yes. So that is a perfect example of when I made the comment earlier about I have this vision, right, of the crones being outside of the society and banding together to do amazing things. So this is, for those who aren't familiar with the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers Council, these are elder women from indigenous tribes throughout the world. North America, South America, Africa. I mean, these are like all over the world that have come together to say, we want to do good things in the world. We want to help heal the world with our customs and rituals, and coming together and praying together and doing things together. We believe in the power of this, and it's really incredible. So this past spring, the grandmothers came together in northern Arizona here for World Water Day. It was a 3-day event on this beautiful land that culminated in an actual silent hike from the land where we were staying to the Montezuma's well, where we encircled the outside of the well, and then there was 300 people there, 300 women, and we kind of wound all the way down to the bottom of where the water is, almost like an umbilical cord, right? And had this beautiful healing ceremony. So that time, there's so many things that were incredible about being there. But there's 2 big things that really stood out to me. And, some of these women are very elderly and not in terrific health. And they're, of course, sitting up in their little area, and we're kind of all sitting around the sacred space, and so you can kind of see them, and they're being attended to and taken care of by the people, their entourage people. But more importantly, they had a genuine love for each other, and they were caretaking each other, and in little tiny ways. Like, they didn't make a big show of it, but if you're paying attention, you could see how when one of them was getting a little chilly, one of them would get a blanket and put it over their legs, or hold their hands, stroke their hands when something special was happening. There was just this genuine love, and it was so very moving. But the other thing that happened was one of the grandmothers, it's her turn to talk, and they're passing the microphone around, and they're not used to talking in the microphone, so that was hysterical. But she spoke for probably the first 6 minutes, which is a really long time, which is kind of this rambling, how do I want to say, like wagging her finger at the younger generation for how we dress and how we present ourselves in the world. And it became this, like, we were being admonished by grandma. But there was that part of me, I could feel part of me that wanted to be like, that whole, oh, grandma, roll your eyes, like, all right, this is person's, you get with it. That's not what life is about anymore. And then at some point she just shifted and she went into some beautiful telling about her life and her work. I believe she was Lakota. I think she was one of the South Dakota grandmas, and talking about her whole life is prayer. She gets up in the morning, she takes care of her community in prayer. She's talking about all these beautiful things that she does. And what really clicked for me was her world is very different than my world. Okay, generationally, this is kind of seems a little strange, but we literally are living in different worlds. Mm-hmm. The kids that are coming in now that are literally being born with technology and smartphones, that they live in a different world than I live in.
Right.
And grandma, the indigenous grandma from the tribe in South Dakota, she lives in a completely different world than I live in. So we can easily tune each other out, because we roll our eyes and go, oh, she's living in the past. She doesn't have anything for me. Mm-hmm. Instead of being patient and waiting for that cultural wrapping, judgmental wrapping to get unwrapped and thrown to the side and get to the beautiful piece that people have to give. So I think there's two important pieces there. One, as the eldering person, to maybe let some of that drop from the conversation and start with, instead of, well, you shouldn't dress that way, you shouldn't, start with let me tell you why you're so special and why you should hold yourself up high. Let me tell you why it's so important that you honor and love yourself. Instead of starting with your bra strap shouldn't be showing, and riding around the world with your skirts up high, and for the younger people that are coming into conversation or contact with the eldering woman, to be in a place of patience, if that's how the conversation starts. Right. To realize that there is some wisdom and guidance and love that's in there somewhere. You just have to wait, right, till you get through some of that. So I know that sounds like, there were some amazing things that happened in that trip, but those were two really big overarching societal pieces that really jumped out to me about my time. Did you have something else in mind when you asked me about that?
No. I wanted to know how it was because here are 13 women who are mentoring.
And so the way this worked was 3 days. We'd come together in the morning, then there'd be a break, come together in the afternoon. So each time we gathered again, one of the grandmothers was in charge of opening the ceremony from her tradition. Oh, cool. So throughout the time, we got to watch these amazing rituals. Yeah. And the other grandmothers were so attentive to whichever grandmother was there doing her sacred piece. And that was just watching those customs and those rituals felt so special and so magical, and I feel so blessed to have just been present for it. Yeah. And feeling the specialness of that. And so they're coming together. They're coming from very different cultures, some of them. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, we're coming together because we all care about the world and we all care about love, and we can have a really powerful, positive impact. And they're doing it. Yeah. And it's inspiring.
It is. It really, really is. They're sharing their wisdom in a very loving manner.
Yes.
Yes. And correct me, because you probably know the story more current than I do if I get this wrong, but they all reached out several years ago to put this together. Mm-hmm. and Garner and said that they had a responsibility to do this.
Yes, and the thing I don't think people realize is that so some of these grandmas that are coming, specifically the one that was coming from South America, she took a 3-day voyage by canoe, basically, and to where she lives in this little village in the middle of nowhere, and it took her like 3 days to get to the place where she got on a plane to come here.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
They also are very impoverished, right? And so they're relying on donations to be able to bring them all together, right? In these places that they go. These are a lot of these the South Dakota grandmothers, the tribes, where they are, they're very impoverished, right? These are not, and yet they did. I think the next event that they had was there on their land, and they were so honored to be able to bring people there and show their land and show their ways. And it's incredible what they've come together to do. Yeah. And it's not easy to put together, and it's not easy on them. Mm-mm. But that's how important it is that they find a way to bring it together. And there's an incredible group of young people that helps to come and support and put and organize and put that all together. But it's just an incredible structure that they've created. And these grandmas said, we're going to do this. Yeah. We need to do this. The world needs this. Mm-hmm. So we need to make this happen.
Right. We can't wait for someone else to do it. We need to do it. And they pulled it together. And a lot of them don't speak English, at least at the very beginning. Minimal. Exactly. And they have, interpreters and stuff. I know that they've gotten better at it. But yeah, and it takes us back to you talking about how we fill the blankness by actually being involved in the world as crones. There's nothing wrong with retiring if that's what you want to do.
Sure.
But if you have this little urge, then go do something, go get involved. And it can be, sometimes we think that we have to lessen any of the other organizations that people spend their time with, like mentoring children and reading and those types of things are going. But oftentimes going to and being a part of something with people of your own age mm-hmm. is also very fulfilling and helps with the gap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, going into nursing homes or assisted living and playing the piano or just spending time with them.
Yeah, I actually last year for about 9 months, I volunteered at a local, it's interesting, it's an adult day health care center. Okay, so this is just where caretakers for their, elderly, most of them were dementia or had strokes and, weren't able to be left at home alone. And the loved ones, right? That's hard work, right? To care for someone full time. Yes. And so what this facility does is it bridges that time between when they can't take care of them anymore and they do have to go into a long-term care facility. But this facility sort of lengthens the time that the family member can stay at home or with their loved one, because it gives the caretaker a break during the day to replenish, to go to work if they have to. So this is like an 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday facility. And I volunteered there Friday afternoons for 4 hours for about 9 months. And it was so fun and inspiring and really interesting to be with these people and to see them treated with respect. They're not parked there. They're not just dropped off and parked there. Mm-hmm. And they're not told, okay, now we're doing this or now we're doing that. There are choices and there are activities, and they take an interest in who they are, mm-hmm. right, as people, and what they did in their lives and what might interest them today. And they do have people that come in from the community and play the piano and they dance and they bowl and they do all kinds of really interesting things. But that was really interesting for me to go and see that, just because you get to a certain age doesn't mean that you turn into the kindly, loving grandma, right?
Right.
There's a ton of different personalities out there. And it reminded me that I don't have to wait to become something that I'm not already, right? Like, I think I had this little bit of this fear of, well, how are you going to be a crone? You're never a mother. How are you going to be a crone? You don't have your shit together. How are you going to be a crone? You don't bake, you don't sew, you don't, like all of these things that I had in my head. And spending time there made me realize I don't have to do anything but just be who I am. And I think that because we don't have the torch passing, right, that's going on necessarily, we can't wait for someone to bestow this on us. This is about what we claim when we're ready to claim for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it reminded me being in this space with all these different personalities of older people all in one place, that it's like, oh yeah, I can be my crabby, cranky, disheveled self and still be a crone in the world. Sure.
Oh my God, yes. Those are some of the funnest moments.
Exactly.
That's why we have, what's her name? Maxine, isn't it?
Yes.
Because not everybody bakes cookies and wears an apron. Nope. It doesn't happen that way.
No.
So this has been marvelous, Suzanne, and I've enjoyed, the deeper discussion and the broader looking at the crone and how she fits into the world, because she does definitely fit in the world.
And she's needed. More than that, she's needed.
She truly, truly is. There's so much. She's the spark in the darkness, and, showing that there is so much out there. So thank you. Is there anything, just before we go, that you would like to share to wrap up? Or
I really, honestly, in this moment, what I want to say is just, I'm in gratitude for you for putting together, right, these conversations and honoring yourself and the other women that are either embarking on this stage of life or are well ensconced there and either thriving or struggling. I mean, these are conversations I think that are really, really important. And for those of us that are right behind on the path and at the threshold and needing readers and having all of the sort of physical shifts and changes happening, it's really great that there are people ahead of us on the path that are really looking towards empowerment and really grabbing a hold of that stage of life and squeezing it for all the juice that you can get out of it. And so I thank you for doing that and for talking about it, for having these conversations.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. It's kind of one of those things, you just kind of gets pushed by spirit and you just got to go do it. So thank you, though. I've had a lot of fun and I've really learned. It's broadened my spectrum too by doing that and reaching out into the community. So thank you. So as much as I don't want to,
I know,
I have to let you go. So thank you again so much, Suzanne. And I'm very honored to have you be a part of this with me. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Mwah.
Love you.
Love
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.